Today, we're going to learn about elicitations in the MCP specification. So we have an MCP server. We know we can build some functionality into it using tools. Now, tools really serve two functions. One, information retrieval. I want to add some context so that the LM can properly answer our request, right? Two is I want to perform some kind of function. Like in today's demo, I want to place an order for a new coffee. This is great. This works. But what happens when you don't have all of the information? I want to place an order for a coffee, but the customer didn't tell me the size, the type of milk, what type of coffee. I need to gather more information. Before elicitations, this would just fail. Now, with MCP elicitations, we have a standardized way for servers to request additional information from the users through the client during this interaction. And that is exactly what an elicitation is. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look at some documentation so you know where to kind of look further and dive down this rabbit hole a little bit more. We're going to build out a new application. We'll talk about it from the server perspective first. We'll build out a simple application that has to request more information. We'll test it out in something like the MCP Inspector. And then I'll show it to you from the client side using Spring AI, building a client, using the built-in annotation like the @MCP elicitations, which will allow us to basically request more information from the user. So a lot to get through. Let's head over to my screen. Here we are on modelcontextprotocol.io. This is elicitation. This flow allows clients to maintain control over user interactions and data sharing while enabling servers to gather necessary information dynamically. So elicitation supports two modes: form mode, where the server can request structured data from the users with optional JSON schemas to validate responses, or URL mode, where servers can direct users to an external URL for sensitive interactions that must not pass through the MCP client. We're just going to take a look at form mode today. Again, we're going to order a coffee. We're not going to have the right information. We're going to request more additional information from the user. So here's the interaction model. If you go through, you can kind of see what this looks like. I'm not going to go through this documentation today. We're actually going to build this out. From the Spring AI side, if you want to take a look at the Spring AI reference documentation, if you go into something like the client annotations, there is an MCP elicitation annotation, and that is going to show you how to handle that elicitation request to gather more information from the users. There's an example here, but of course, we're going to build one out. Now, here is the repo for this, Spring AI MCP elicitation. This is a Maven multi-module project. You don't have to do this. You could build the server separately. You could build the client separately. I wanted to do it this way just so I had all of this code in a single repo for you to look through. So we'll start by building a server, but you can go ahead and use this if you want. I've also created a start here branch so that if you want to jump into this and kind of code along, the client and the server, the multi-module project is there, but the client and the server code that we're going to go through and do is not there. So you can follow along if you want. If you are going to start from scratch, a good place to do this, start.spring.io. Pick a Java project, Maven. We are going to pick the latest 3.5 version because 4.0 runs on Spring AI 2.0 milestone 1, which has not been updated in the Spring Initializer yet. I say yet because I know it's coming soon. But you want to come in here and go ahead and set this up. So I would just say something like dev.danvega, coffee shop server, right? And all you want to do from here is we would pick something like web, and we would pick something like the MCP protocol server. Once you have that, I think in this case, we also want something like OpenAI. Once you have those, you can download that. You can start the server project. Again, I'm going to jump over to that start here branch of the GitHub repo so that I have the client and the server there. But this should be sufficient enough for you to get started. So we have what we need. If you are starting from this, open it up in your favorite IDE, text editor, whatever you're most efficient in. I'm going to do that in IntelliJ. but I think we have what we need. Let's write some code. All right, so here we are in that multi-module project. We have a client and a server. We're going to start with the server. If you go over to source main Java and you see the server application, just a Spring application, right? We have the Spring Boot Starter Web. We're using OpenAI. We have that MCP server and we're using MVC, so it brought in the correct starter. From a resource perspective, in the application.yaml, I have this in the starter as well. I'm setting up my OpenAI API key. I have an environment variable for that. You can go ahead and hard code that if you like. And then I just set up a few properties about the server. So MCP server name, here's the name of it. Here's the version. Type is sync or async. We're using synchronous. And then you have to set up the protocol. Is this a streamable, SSE, stateless? We are not using something like standard in and out. So that by default is false. So this is the server settings that you want. And we're going to run this on 8081 because when we create a client, we'll start that up on 8080. So that gives you everything you need to get started. This should run. Let's go ahead and see if this runs. And I'm in the client app right now. I don't want to start that actually. I want to start the server app. Yes, this starts on 8081. Okay, I forgot. I'm going to take me out of here so we don't have to look at me and we can look at some code. And we need to begin to build this out. So I'm going to create a new class and I'm going to call this my coffee tools, right? Sure. And what we're going to do is we're going to mark this as a component. So this gets picked up. I have a little live template to create a logger here. And then we can just go ahead and create our first MCP tool. We do that using the MCP tool annotation. We can give it a name like, hey, I want to order some coffee. And I give it a description. And this is place an order at Dan's coffee shop. Use this whenever a customer wants to order coffee, right? So we're just trying to be a little bit descriptive here because when a tool is loaded, the large language model looks at a collection of tools and it looks at the description and it is the one that decides should one of these tools be called. And so the better the description, without being too exhaustive here, the better, because now we can kind of say like, all right, this is what this method is going to do. So we can say this is going to be order coffee. And what I want to do here is actually have some tool params. And so tool params, MCP tool param, is a way to define what parameters we're going to have here. So I'm going to say description, and we'll say coffee size, right? And this is just going to be string size. And we're actually going to probably do, whoops, a couple of these. Let's say 3. All right, so we have our parameters there, and then we'll get one more, which is the MCP sync request context, and we'll call this CTX, and that is everything we need. So now that we have what we need as arguments to this, let's just say, let's log this out. Yeah, so order coffee, size, type, milk, etc. Okay, the first thing we want to do is, do we have everything? If so, skip elicitation, right? So if we have everything, then we don't need to ask the user for more information. So we can do some validation here. If size is not equal to null and size basically is not blank. Oh, yes, that's pretty good. So type is not equal to null and is empty and milk is empty. Sure, that looks good. So what we can do there then is say return, and we want to say, let's use an emoji, of course, coffee. So coffee order confirmed. And let's say S with milk. And we'll pass in size, type, and milk. Okay, so good. If we got everything, skip elicitation. We don't need that. But if not, we are missing some information, right? Ask for it. And the way that we're going to do this is we're first going to check, is elicitation enabled? So ctx.elicitation enabled, yes. So if it is, or if it's not enabled, sorry, what we're going to do is just say, please provide size, type, and milk. And this is basically how we did it before elicitations, right? We need to ask for more information. If it is enabled, then I can go ahead and use elicitation. And to do so, I'm going to need something. I'm going to need some structured data here. I'm going to need a coffee order. So let's go ahead and create a new record. So I'll say Java class, coffee order. And this is going to be a record. And I'll just paste this in. It's just a few things, size, type, and milk. But we also, in the JSON property description, set up coffee size, small, medium, or large. Now, again, in the real world, these may be enums, but this is fine for a demonstration. All right, I'm just going to paste a couple things in here. So from the context, we can elicit, and we're basically getting a spec here. And we say, here's the message. Let's complete a coffee order. Here's the coffee order class. And then basically the user or the action can be accepted. I think let's go back to the documentation. It says it in here. So we must be, I know one of them is accept. So 3 responses are accept, decline, and cancel. So as long as it's accept, if it's not accept, then we're going to go ahead and cancel the order. If not, we're going to get the structured content, so from the result, and then we can go ahead and return that. So basically saying as long as the action is accept, then we're okay. We can go ahead and return that. So what does this look like? So let's go ahead and try to run this application. So let's rerun this. Okay, this started up. So now what I'm going to do is open up the MCP Inspector. This is in the Model Context Protocol.io website. This is from MCP. So we go ahead and run this, and this is a tool for us to go ahead and test out our MCP server. This will open in a browser. It actually opened in another window for me. So let's pull it over here. And now we can go ahead and connect to an MCP server. In this case, we've defined our protocol as streamable HTTP. The server is running on 8081, and then MCP is just part of that path. Spring kind of puts that in place for us. Now I can go ahead and connect to it. We know we have some tools, right? Let's go ahead and list our tools. We have an order coffee tool, and this tool takes in the size, the type, and the milk. Now, if we try to run this without adding this data, what we're hoping happens here is that we get into this tool, we get into this method, this passes because, or this doesn't pass because we don't have all of the information. We know elicitations are enabled. So we know elicitations are enabled. So what we're going to try to do is elicit the user, the client, to complete that coffee order, and we pass in that type. That's the type that we have. So we need these 3 things to go ahead and complete that order. So let's see if this works. Run tool. Here's the elicitation. Now we have that over here. Let's complete your coffee order. We have milk, coffee size, and this required. I've gotten this before here. I would just ignore that. It's still going to work. So let's say that we want almond milk, we want a small, and we want a latte. Now we can go ahead and submit this. And this timed out, but let me try it again. I've had this happen, but I've also had this work. So let's say almond, small, latte. So we're going to go ahead and submit this and order confirmed, small latte with almond milk. This is coming from here, right here. So we know we have all the information that we need. So pretty cool to see. So from the server side, not a whole lot going on here. When we ask for those specific arguments, we can go ahead and make sure they're all there. If they're not, then we can go ahead and elicit the client for more information. Once we have all of the information, now we can go ahead and complete our task. Again, in this case, just printing something out, but you can imagine like actually ordering a coffee. Okay, so now that we have it working there, maybe we want to use this in a Spring AI MCP client. So we can go out to the client, source main resources, application.yaml. Again, we're setting up our OpenAI API key. We're defining some properties about the client. So the name, the version, the request timeout, tool callbacks. Here's where this differs from any other MCP client that you may have written before. You need to enable the capabilities, in this case, elicitations. Remember at the beginning of this, I said you can use both form or URL-based elicitations. We are just going to use a form one here. Then what we do from a client perspective is set up our MCP servers that we can connect to. So in this case, I have a streamable HTTP server. The name of it is Coffee Shop. It is running on 8081. All right. So let's go in here and create a little bit of code to help us with this. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this my elicitation handler. Okay, and in my elicitation handler, this is going to be a component. I am going to get a logger. I am also going to need a scanner because we are going to read from this. Now, again, if you wanted to build a full-fledged client that like basically presented a form, I'm just running this from the command line. I just need to read in some information. So I'll just use a scanner, and new, yes, that'll work. And then from there, we can build out our elicitation result. I'm going to copy this and paste this. And basically, we use that new annotation I pointed you to in the documentation, MCP Elicitation. Here's the number of clients that we have. So again, if we had a bunch of different clients, we may not want to elicit information from all of them. But here is the one that we do care about, which is the coffee shop. So what we do is we get in a request and we basically say, here's the message. I pulled from the documentation. Hey, I want to get the requested schema, get the properties for each property. Let's go ahead and ask the user to input that data. Once we do that, we can return the elicit result action accept. That should look familiar. Again, there's accept, deny. I can't remember the other one now. But those are the three actions that you can basically control as far as an elicitation goes. Okay, so that's like some of the new stuff, some of the boilerplate stuff. Let's see how we can get this to actually work in our application. So I'm going to create a Java class. I'm going to call this my chat controller. This is something that I would have built in the past. So I can just call this a REST controller. And then I'll go ahead and I'll do a couple of things here. I'll get a logger. And I also want a chat client. So a chat client I have a little shortcut for. And this is for me to talk to OpenAI because I'm going to ask OpenAI something like, hey, can you order me a coffee? OpenAI is going to say, I don't know how to do that, but I see you have a tool in an MCP server defined that can do that for me. So I have that chat client. I can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a get mapping. This will just be for the root endpoint. And then what we want to do is public string chat. And we're going to return the chat client dot prompt. And then I'm going to say user, and I'm going to say I would like to order a coffee. Okay. And I'm going to make a blocking call, and I'm going to get the string response back. Now I could go through the motions and show you this, run it and see it not work. One of the problems that I found is that if I'm calling an MCP tool like the one in our server that has arguments, and I don't supply those arguments, then it doesn't seem to call that MCP tool. Now, I have raised this with the Spring AI team, so we'll see if that is something we can correct on our side. But what I did to correct this is just add a system message here. You are a barista at Dan's coffee shop. When a customer wants to order coffee, always call the order coffee tool immediately. Please pass empty strings as any parameters that the customer did not specify. Again, you may not need this in the future, but for now, I'm going to need this. So now what we should do is if we can start our client application. Does this one not run? All right, let's go back here. Oh, we actually deleted the thing that we needed, right? So we don't want to, again, I started with the master branch or the main branch, and then I came back over here and decided that I wanted a starting place for us to do this in. So let's go ahead and say new Java app, clients, application, right? Sure. Spring Boot application, public static void main. And this will be spring application.run. Client application, sure. String R, sorry, even though we're not using them. Okay, so let's see if this runs now. Okay, so this should start on 8080, and it does. So now what I want to do is basically make a request to localhost 8080, which will kick this off, which will then tell the LM to make me a coffee. It will realize it can't do that. It will see a tool in the schema definition of tools that it has, and it will pass it back to us. We will call the MCP server to order a coffee. The MCP server will say, hey, you don't have all of the information, and it should send it back to us. Let's see if this works. I don't need that anymore. What I want to do is just send a request to 8080 and no information back there. This is going to pause. I'll get that order right away for you. One moment, please. Calling order coffee with empty parameters. So let's go back to our server. I don't think our server was called. Order coffee size. Oh, it was called there. So why wasn't the elicitation run? All right, yeah, so it's still not calling the server. So I believe that this, again, this is the problem here. It is not respecting that tool because I've not passed it some things. Let me go ahead and stop these on the starter here. Let me jump over to my master branch. Okay, and let's see if we can start the server app from here, the client app from here. And let me try this one more time. And if I go back over here, now you see that scanner is working. So let me complete your coffee order. What kind of milk do you want? I'm going to say almond, small, and we will say latte. So now it's done the elicitation and it's asked for the info. If we go back to here, your coffee order is confirmed. A small latte with almond milk. Enjoy. And if we go over to the server, we shall see that that order was actually placed. So order coffee called with, that's the first call, I believe. And then the second one should be where it returned it. But that return came back to the console, and we were able to see that elicitation happen. So I'm not quite sure what was happening in my starting branch. But again, I've seen this problem before on the client side. We saw that it works fine on the MCP Inspector side. Something with the Spring AI client here and the server tool that expects some arguments. If you pass the arguments, it gets called every single time. If you don't pass the arguments, then it doesn't want to call it. That's why I added that system level message to do it. So, hey, friends, I hope you learned something new today. Had a little fun with elicitations, and now at least you know what they are at a surface level. Again, part of this is just knowing what tools are in your tool belt. So if you're building out an MCP server and you find that at some point you need to get some more information from the user, now you know that you can do so using elicitation. So, hey, if you had some fun with this, you learned something new, do me a big favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.